March 23, 1945. 2,100 hours. West bank of the Rhine near Wesel, Germany. Cold mist drifts low over the water. Searchlights cut thin white blades across the sky. Somewhere beyond the river, German artillery shifts position. Metal tracks grinding against frozen soil. An American soldier kneels in the mud, hammering a wooden stake into the ground. He is not digging a trench. He is anchoring a tank. But the tank weighs less than a field tent. Canvas ripples in the wind as air pumps whine to life. Within minutes, a full-size M4 Sherman rises from the earth, turret angled toward the east, silhouette sharp against the night. Another follows, then another in the distance. Heavy loudspeakers crackle, and the low mechanical rumble of armored columns begins to roll across the darkness. It sounds real. It is not. Men in oversized paint-splattered jackets move quickly between the inflating vehicles, adjusting seams, brushing mud along the rubber tracks to dull their shine. They are artists from New York, set designers from Broadway, illustrators, sculptors. Officially, they are the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. Unofficially, they are something far stranger. They are about to convince Hitler's generals that an entire American army stands before them. Across the river, German forward observers peer through binoculars. They see armored formations assembling. They hear engines idling. They watch signal lamps flicker between command posts. Everything suggests a massive buildup opposite Wesel. Everything suggests that Lieutenant General George S. Patton's Third Army is preparing to punch straight across this sector at first light. German staff officers mark maps in red pencil. Reserves are shifted. Artillery is re-registered. Anti-tank guns are repositioned toward the phantom threat. And all of it is wrong. Behind the inflatable armor, hidden by trees and darkness, signal operators tap out fake radio traffic in authentic corps-level procedure. Call signs match known American formations. Static, coded chatter, clipped urgency. German listening posts intercept every word. To them, the pattern confirms what their eyes already report. An American armored division is massing for a direct assault. The deception is layered. Visual, audible, electromagnetic. Sound trucks positioned miles apart blast carefully engineered recordings of bridging equipment. Tank columns clanking over steel. Engineers shouting orders. The recordings were made weeks earlier at full-scale maneuvers. Played at night through 500-pound speakers. The effect carries across valleys and through tree lines. You would swear thousands of men were moving. In reality, fewer than 1,200 soldiers operate the entire illusion. Captain Fred Fox, once a commercial artist, studies the layout from a Jeep hood lit by shielded flashlight. Every inflatable tank must align with expected tactical spacing. Too perfect, and suspicion grows. Too careless, and the illusion fractures. He adjusts positions by yards, not meters. Precision matters, because timing matters. Far south of this sector, real assault units prepared across the river under Operation Plunder. Assault boats are stacked along concealed banks. Combat engineers check demolition charges. Infantry from the U.S. Ninth Army whisper final instructions. Their objective lies miles away from the spectacle unfolding near Wesel. The Ghost Army's task is simple in theory. Hold German attention here. Fix their reserves in place. Make them believe the hammer will fall where only shadows gather. At 2,230 hours, German artillery opens fire. Shells whistle overhead and slam into empty fields behind the rubber tanks. Dirt erupts. Canvas shudders but holds. One inflatable Sherman collapses as shrapnel slices through its flank, sagging like a punctured lung. Within minutes, 2 soldiers drag it upright and patch the tear with adhesive and canvas tape. From across the river, it still looks operational. The bombardment intensifies. Some of the men flinch. These are not frontline infantry hardened by years of combat. Many have never fired a rifle in anger. Yet they remain at their posts, adjusting speakers, checking generators, inflating decoys under incoming fire. Because if they withdraw, the illusion collapses. Shortly after midnight, German reconnaissance patrols probe 4 positions along the eastern bank. Flares ignite the sky, washing the false armor in harsh white light. For a moment, the deception teeters. Rubber reflects differently than steel. Edges look too smooth, too clean. Then artillery smoke drifts in. Shadows deepen. The tanks regain their solidity. German observers radio confirmation. Enemy armor concentrated west of Wesel. Estimated strength, multiple divisions. High command reacts. Panzer reserves earmarked for other threatened sectors are ordered to remain north. Infantry battalions entrench opposite the decoys. Valuable hours pass, and south of this phantom front, the real assault begins to move. Engines start. Boats slide silently toward black water. The Rhine will be crossed tonight, but not where Germany expects. January 20th, 1944, 0700 hours. Camp Forest, Tennessee. Frost clings to the canvas roofs of barracks as a whistle cuts through the morning air. Men step out into the cold, not with the stiffness of infantry drilled for bayonet charges, but with the curious posture of men who once carried sketchbooks instead of rifles. One adjusts his spectacles. Another tucks charcoal pencils into his breast pocket, as though he might need them at any moment. They have been gathered from art schools, advertising agencies, architecture firms, and theater stages across America. Set designers from Broadway, fashion illustrators from Manhattan, sculptors from Chicago. The Army has reviewed portfolios as carefully as it once reviewed marksmanship scores. Now they stand in olive drab. The unit is designated the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. The name reveals nothing. That is deliberate. Official paperwork lists them as engineers and signal personnel. Their true function exists only in classified memoranda circulating between War Department planners and Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. The concept is simple in theory and radical in execution. Create an entire tactical formation from nothing. Make the enemy see what does not exist. Make him react. Make him commit resources to ghosts. Colonel Harriel. Reader 3 studies the assembled men with a measured gaze. He understands a gamble. These are not seasoned combat veterans. Many have never heard artillery outside a training range, yet their value lies precisely in what they were before the uniform. They understand perspective. They understand lighting. They understand how distance distorts shape and how shadows can conceal imperfections. They will weaponize illusion. Training begins immediately. Inflatable tanks are unrolled across muddy fields. At first glance, the rubber Shermans look absurd, sagging and lifeless until air pumps inflate their hulls. Once upright, however, their silhouettes become convincing at 200 yards. At 500, they are indistinguishable from steel. Men practice rapid deployment. A decoy artillery battery must be placed in under 30 minutes. Inflatable 155 mm guns are positioned with authentic spacing. Tracks are pressed into mud with hand tools to simulate vehicle movement. Tire marks are dragged deliberately, overlapping in irregular patterns to avoid suspicion. Sound engineers experiment with massive loudspeakers mounted on trucks. Recordings of real armored divisions maneuvering are played across Tennessee valleys. The echoes behave differently depending on humidity, tree density, and terrain contour. Adjustments are made. Volume levels calibrated. Playback sequences timed to mimic actual operational rhythms. Then comes radio deception. Signal Corps specialists rehearse entire corps-level communications nets. Operators memorize call signs, voice cadences, and procedural shorthand used by established American divisions. They transmit false traffic in deliberate bursts, careful not to overplay the hand. Too much chatter invites scrutiny. Too little breeds doubt. Every element must align. In March 1944, the unit sails for England. Within months, they are operating in Normandy. Their first field tests occur under real enemy observation. Inflatable armor position near the front line draws German artillery fire away from genuine assembly areas. Casualties are avoided not by armor plating, but by canvas and air. Confidence grows, yet the risks remain lethal. During one operation in the French countryside, German patrols approached within rifle range of a decoy encampment. Soldiers scrambled to reposition equipment while maintaining the facade of normalcy. One misstep, one soldier lifting a rubber barrel too casually, could unravel the entire performance. They learn to act. That is perhaps their greatest weapon. Actors, illustrators, and architects adopt the body language of hardened infantry. They smoke with calculated nonchalance beside inflatable half-tracks. They erect signposts bearing authentic divisional insignia. Laundry lines appear between trees. Mess tents release carefully controlled smoke plumes. Even garbage is staged to suggest large troop presence. It is theater under threat of death. By late 1944, German intelligence begins tracking phantom American formations that appear, disappear, and reappear miles away within days. Reports circulate of entire divisions shifting faster than logistics should allow. Confusion spreads through Wehrmacht headquarters. The illusionists refine their craft. They know the enemy studies aerial reconnaissance photographs. Therefore, decoys are positioned to cast proper shadows at specific times of day. They angle turrets according to standard defensive posture. They space vehicles based on real tactical manuals. Nothing is random, because randomness betrays fabrication. As winter grips Europe and Allied forces push toward Germany's western frontier, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops receives new orders. A major river stands ahead, the Rhine. Its crossing will determine the speed and shape of the war's final phase. German High Command anticipates assault. They expect brute force, massed armor, thunderous artillery preparation. What they do not expect is an army of artists preparing to draw their gaze elsewhere. In a dimly lit briefing tent near the front, maps are spread across a folding table. Wesel is circled in grease pencil. Sound truck placements are marked with small blue XS. Inflatable armor zones sketched in neat arcs. Colonel Reeder speaks quietly. The objective is not destruction. It is misdirection. If successful, German panzer reserves will remain fixed opposite a threat that does not exist. If successful, real assault divisions will cross the Rhine with reduced resistance. If successful, fewer men will die. The artists nod. They understand the stakes. Tomorrow night, they begin building an army from air. March 22nd, 1945. 1,630 hours. Forest edge west of Wesel. A convoy of unmarked trucks rolls beneath skeletal trees. Engines throttle low. To a distant observer, it looks routine. Supply vehicles repositioning before nightfall. Nothing remarkable. But the cargo they carry does not fire bullets. It fires echoes. Technicians from a 3,132nd Signal Service Company step down into damp leaf litter and begin unloading steel-framed loudspeakers the size of refrigerator crates. Each cabinet weighs nearly 500 pounds. Cables uncoil across the ground like black serpents. Generators are positioned behind natural cover. Captain Bill Blass, once a fashion illustrator, studies the tree lean through field glasses. He calculates angles the way he once calculated runway lighting. Sound must travel cleanly across the river. Too much obstruction, and the illusion thins. Too much volume, and distortion betrays artifice. At 1,700 hours, rehearsal begins. A low mechanical rumble rolls from the first speaker. It is a recorded growl of M4 Sherman engines recorded weeks earlier during full-scale maneuvers. The sound builds gradually, layered with metallic clanking, shouted commands, and the rhythmic grind of tracks over steel bridging plates. The forest vibrates. At a mile's distance, it is convincing. At 3 miles, it is indistinguishable from reality. Across the Rhine, German listening posts adjust headphones. Feldwebel Otto Kramer frowns and increases volume on his receiver. The acoustic signature matches armored movement, not sporadic patrol traffic. Sustained assembly. He logs the time. 1,712 hours. Enemy armor concentration intensifying west of Wesel. Back on the American side, operators modulate pitch and cadence. The recordings are not played continuously. That would suggest theatrical staging. Instead, they mimic operational rhythm. Engines rev, pause, shift position. Metal ramps clang into place. Trucks back up with deliberate beeping tones. Engineers shout distances in practice Midwestern accents. Even silence is curated. Between sound bursts, the forest falls still. Wind rustles branches. Then the rumble resumes from a slightly altered direction, implying maneuver. Meanwhile, visual deception teams inflate additional tanks in staggered intervals. From elevated German observation towers, shapes multiply as twilight deepens. Canvas hulls cast long shadows in the slanting light. At 1830 hours, radio operators join the performance, using authentic call signs of a real armored division known to German intelligence. They transmit controlled bursts of encrypted chatter, reports of fuel shortages, requests for artillery calibration, movement coordinates that correspond precisely to the phantom armor below. German signals intelligence intercepts every transmission. Patterns match established doctrine. The illusion tightens. Night settles. At 2000 hours, the soundscape shifts. Heavy bridging equipment begins to dominate the audio profile. Steel girders scraping. Pontoon sections splashing into water. Orders barked over amplified megaphones. This is deliberate escalation. If the enemy believes bridging operations are imminent at Wesel, artillery will pre-register the sector. Infantry reserves will remain fixed. Panzer divisions will hesitate to redeploy south. Inside a concealed command truck, Colonel Reeder monitors synchronized timing. Every element must align with broader Allied operations unfolding miles away. Real crossing units prepare in darkness, boats stacked along hidden banks. They rely on the deception to buy hours. At 2,130 hours, German artillery answers. Shells whistle overhead and crash into empty clearings behind inflatable armor. Dirt geysers skyward. Shock waves ripple canvas hulls. One speaker cabinet topples under concussion, audio briefly warping into metallic distortion. Technicians sprint forward, dragging it upright under falling debris. The rumble resumes within seconds. Consistency is survival. Across the river, German staff officers gather around map tables illuminated by shaded lamps. Reports converge. Visual confirmation of armor massing. Acoustic confirmation of bridging. Radio confirmation of corps-level command presence. Conclusion: major assault imminent at Wesel. Orders are issued. An infantry regiment previously scheduled for redeployment south is halted. Anti-tank batteries remain oriented north. Ammunition reserves are shifted toward the perceived threat. The Ghost Army senses a shift without hearing the orders. Artillery density increases. Flares ignite overhead. Machine gun tracers rake treetops. Private Harold Glickman, once an art student in Brooklyn, presses himself against a speaker cabinet as shrapnel slices bark from nearby trunks. His hands shake, but he adjusts a volume dial with deliberate precision. The rumble must not falter, because somewhere south, real engineers are lowering assault boats into the Rhine. At 2,300 hours, the sound trucks simulate the heaviest concentration yet. Engines surge at maximum amplitude. Bridge sections clang with metallic authority. From German observation bunkers, it feels undeniable. The Americans are crossing here. They are not. Miles downstream, in sectors deliberately quiet, assault troops slip onto black water. Paddles dip without echo. No speakers announce their presence. No inflated tanks mark their assembly. The deception has done its work. But the night is not finished. Shortly before midnight, German reconnaissance patrols begin probing closer to the riverbank opposite the phantom force. If they advance too far, if they glimpse the rubber sheen beneath flare light, the illusion could fracture in seconds. And once fractured, artillery will shift south. The men among the speakers wait in breathless tension, because the next German step will determine whether the Rhine crossing becomes a slaughter or a breakthrough. March 23, 1945. 0015 hours. West bank of the Rhine, opposite Wesel. The first German flare bursts overhead, flooding the riverbank in merciless white light. Shadows snap into hard focus. Inflatable Sherman stand in rigid formation, their rubber hulls gleaming faintly beneath drifting smoke. For a fraction of a second, the illusion feels fragile. Then artillery begins. Shells arc from the eastern bank and slam into the fields behind the decoys. The concussion punches air from lungs. Mud and frozen earth rain down in heavy clods. One inflatable tank buckles as shrapnel slices through its flank, collapsing on itself like a dying lung. "Patch it," a sergeant orders, voice steady despite the blast waves still rolling through his chest. Two men sprint forward with repair kits, dragging canvas upright while another pumps air back into the wounded hull. Adhesive spreads across torn rubber. Within minutes, the tank rises again, turret angled defiantly toward the river. From across the Rhine, it appears untouched. Sound trucks continue their orchestration. Engines roar at maximum amplitude, layered with the metallic crash of bridging sections being lowered into water. Engineers shout measurements into megaphones, their recorded voices echoing across the valley. The Germans respond exactly as predicted. Machine gun tracers rake the river's edge. Mortars thud into empty assembly zones. Anti-tank guns adjust their barrels toward the densest concentration of phantom armor. Every shell that detonates here is a shell not landing miles downstream. Inside a camouflage command truck, radio operators maintain their false core net. Call signs flash across the ether. Reports of heavy resistance at bridge site. Requests for smoke cover. Artillery adjustment coordinates that correspond precisely to the decoy positions. German signals intelligence intercepts the chatter and logs it as confirmation. Enemy armor engaged. At 0100 hours, the bombardment intensifies. A direct hit obliterates one speaker cabinet, splintering its steel frame and silencing an entire channel of engine noise. The soundscape falters for 3 long seconds. Too long. Technicians drag a backup unit into place under falling debris. Generator cords snap into sockets. The rumble resumes, slightly off rhythm at first, then synchronized once more. Consistency restored. Private Harold Glickman tastes cordite and soil as he wipes blood from a shallow cut above his eye. He glances toward the river and imagines German observers studying the spectacle through binoculars, convinced they are witnessing the spearhead of Patton's Third Army. In reality, Patton's real crossing sectors lie to the south, where assault boats now glide across dark water under cover of silence. Engineers are fight currents and hidden debris. Infantry crouch low, rifles wrapped in oilcloth. No speakers announce their approach. The deception must hold. At 0130 hours, German artillery shifts slightly north, attempting to bracket the perceived bridge site. Shells detonate in tight clusters, carving craters into fields already churned by previous barges. Inflatable trucks sway, but remain upright. Painted insignia glows faintly beneath flare light. Across the river, German staff officers confer in reinforced bunkers. Reports indicate intense American activity at Wesel. Visual confirmation persists. Acoustic evidence is overwhelming. Radio intercepts align perfectly. Conclusion: major crossing underway at this sector. Reserves remain fixed. An armor battalion originally slated for rapid redeployment south is ordered to maintain position. Fuel trucks are diverted northward. Ammunition stocks are prioritized for batteries covering the phantom assault. Time stretches. At 0200 hours, the Ghost Army executes the final escalation. Sound trucks simulate tanks rolling onto completed bridge spans. Metallic clanks echo across the river. Recorded engines shift from idle rumble to forward thrust. To German ears, it signals breakthrough. Artillery fire reaches its peak. Entire salvos hammer empty ground. One shell lands dangerously close to a generator truck, shredding canvas and puncturing fuel drums. Flames lick briefly before being smothered with sand. Smoke rises, blending with pre-planned smoke pots that obscure imperfections in the decoys. Even chaos becomes camouflage. Through it all, fewer than 1,200 men maintain the illusion of tens of thousands. At 0300 hours, reports begin filtering into German headquarters from southern sectors. Unconfirmed enemy movement along quieter stretches of the Rhine. Initial crossing suspected. Confusion ripples. Could the main assault be elsewhere? Staff officers hesitate. Intelligence from Wesel remains overwhelming. To shift reserves now risks abandoning what appears to be the primary threat. Dawn approaches. Mist thickens over the river, softening outlines and swallowing detail. Inflatable armor fades into gray silhouette, convincing in its stillness. Sound trucks reduce output gradually, implying consolidation of bridgeheads rather than continued assault. Across the Rhine, German artillery finally slackens. Ammunition stocks partially depleted after hours of bombardment against empty steel and air. Miles south, Real Allied divisions established firm footholds on the eastern bank. Engineers assembled genuine pontoon bridges under far lighter resistance than anticipated. Infantry push inland before German reserves can react. The deception has bought hours. In river crossings, hours decide casualties. As first light creeps across the horizon, the ghost army surveys fields torn apart by shells that never struck real armor. Inflatable tanks stand scarred but upright. Speaker cabinets hum with residual vibration. They have absorbed the fury of a defending army without presenting a single steel target. Yet uncertainty lingers. If German reconnaissance crosses a river at dawn and discovers rubber beneath the smoke, the retaliation will be swift. The illusion has held through the night, but daylight is merciless. March 23, 1945, 0435 hours. South of Wesel, near Oppenheim. Mist hangs low over the Rhine, thick enough to swallow entire platoons. The water moves black and silent beneath the overcast sky. There are no loudspeakers here, no staged engine noise, only the faint dip of paddles and the shallow breathing of men about to step into history. Assault boats push off from the western bank in staggered intervals. Engineers from the 249th Engineer Combat Battalion guide them with muted hand signals. Infantry from the U.S. Third Army crouch low, helmets barely visible above the gunnels. Rifles are wrapped in oilcloth. Faces are streaked with mud. No artillery announces their departure. Upstream, at Wesel, German guns continue firing sporadic salvos at inflatable armor. The deception still holds enough weight to anchor their attention. But here, miles south, the eastern bank waits under thin defensive lines not yet reinforced. The first boat scrapes against gravel. A lieutenant steps into knee-deep water, boots sinking into silt. He signals forward. Men fan out silently, securing a shallow perimeter along the river's edge. No searchlights cut across this sector. No flares burn overhead. They're inside the German defensive arc before the arc realizes it has been breached. At 0500 hours, engineers begin assembling pontoon sections. Steel connectors snap into place with muted clinks. Ropes are pulled taut, anchors dropped into current. Every movement is deliberate, controlled, efficient. Behind them, additional waves cross. By 0530 hours, a foothold exists on the eastern bank. Small arms fire erupt sporadically as German outposts stumble upon an incursion. The exchange is sharp but localized. There is no mass artillery response, no immediate armored counterattack, because reserves remain fixed north, staring at ghosts. At 0600 hours, American artillery finally opens from concealed western batteries. Not to herald crossing, but to deepen it. Shells land further inland, targeting road junctions and suspected command posts. The tempo escalates. German headquarters begins receiving fragmented reports. Enemy troops confirmed south of Wesel, crossing at Oppenheim. Additional activity near Nierstein. Confusion spreads across map tables. Staff officers review overnight intelligence. Everything pointed to a primary assault opposite Wesel. Visual concentration, acoustic signatures, radio intercepts. Yet the river has been breached elsewhere. Orders are issued to redeploy armor reserves. But redeployment takes time. Engines must be started, fuel convoys rerouted, infantry extricated from prepared positions. And now, under growing artillery pressure, movement becomes hazardous. On the eastern bank, American engineers complete the first usable pontoon bridge shortly after 0700 hours. Light vehicles begin crossing. Jeeps, anti-tank guns. Then the heavier units prepare to follow. The sound of real engines now echoes across the river. This time, it is not recorded. German artillery attempts to reorient south, but coordinates are imprecise. Observation posts lack clarity. Smoke and morning haze distort range estimates. Shells land short, then long, failing to disrupt the bridgehead's consolidation. By 0800 hours, the foothold has expanded beyond a fragile landing zone. Infantry push inland, seizing farmhouses and road intersections. Machine gun nests are cleared. Prisoners are taken. The breakthrough begins to take shape. Meanwhile, at Wesel, reconnaissance units cautiously probe forward after the intensity of the night's bombardment. Through thinning smoke, they glimpse tanks standing eerily still. Two still. One patrol edges closer along the riverbank. A flare is fired. White light cascades over rubber hulls scarred by shrapnel, but oddly intact. A soldier approaches one decoy cautiously, rifle raised. He reaches out and strikes the hull with the butt of his weapon. It trembles. Not steel. Canvas. The realization spreads quickly. Reports rush back across field telephones. The massive armor concentration opposite Wesel never existed. By the time German command grasps the full extent of the deception, American armored units are already crossing the real bridges to the south. Sherman tanks, this time made of steel and firepower, roll onto eastern soil under protective artillery cover. Panzer reserves scramble to reposition, but the delay has fractured defensive cohesion. Counterattacks are launched in piecemeal fashion rather than concentrated force. Momentum shifts irreversibly. On the western bank near Wesel, the men of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops begin deflating tanks under sporadic sniper fire. Air hisses from punctured seams. Canvas folds into compact bundles. Speaker cabinets are loaded onto trucks. They leave behind craters and confusion. No grand parade marks their departure. No headlines announce their role. Yet the crossing they enable will accelerate the collapse of Germany's western defenses. As American armored columns surge eastward beyond the river, German commanders confront an uncomfortable truth. They had chased shadows. And in chasing them, they surrender the Rhine. March 23, 1945, 0940 hours. Eastern bank of the Rhine, north of Wesel. The patrol returns at a run. Boots splash through shallow craters filled with muddy water. One soldier carries a torn strip of canvas under his arm like a captured flag. He bursts into a reinforced command bunker, where maps still display thick red arrows pointing toward the Phantom Assault Zone. "It's rubber," he says, breathless. "All of it." For several seconds, no one speaks. The bunker smells of damp concrete and cigarette smoke. A colonel steps forward, takes a canvas fragment, presses it between his fingers. The material is slick, synthetic, unmistakably artificial. Outside, binoculars rise again. The tanks across the river are still visible through lingering haze. They stand at odd angles, motionless despite the lull in artillery. No exhaust plumes drift upward. No infantry moves between them. The illusion fractures in silence. Telephones begin ringing along the sector. Reports converge. Sound trucks have gone quiet. Radio chatter that once crackled with urgency has vanished. German signals intelligence officers review the previous night's intercept logs with sudden unease. The patterns have been perfect. Too perfect. South of Wesel, the reality grows louder by the minute. At 1,000 hours, the first confirmed reports of heavy armor crossing near Oppenheim reach divisional headquarters. American tanks, real tanks, are advancing inland. Road junctions have fallen. Forward defensive lines are collapsing under coordinated pressure. Orders are issued to redeploy armored reserves immediately. Engines ignite in hurried convoys. But distance is unforgiving. The roads leading south are already under artillery observation. Shellfire disrupts movement. Columns disperse under aerial strafing runs that now exploit exposed highways. The delay has cost more than hours. It has cost initiative. Back on the western bank near Wesel, the men of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops continue dismantling their battlefield theater. Inflatable Shermans are deflated, folded with mechanical efficiency. Speaker cabinets are loaded onto trucks scarred by shrapnel. Painted insignia are scrubbed from signposts. They work quickly but without panic. Their mission is complete. Private Harold Glickman pauses beside a collapsed tank and runs his hand across the rubber surface. The same material that absorbed artillery salvos has redirected the course of an entire operation. He looks across the river at the silent German positions and understands, perhaps for the first time, the scale of what they accomplished. They did not fire a single direct shot across the Rhine, yet they compelled an army to fire thousands. By midday, German command issues a revised offensive directive. Forces north of Wesel are ordered to disengage where possible and reinforce southern sectors. But coordination falters. Communications lines are overloaded. Fuel shortages slow armored redeployment. American bridgeheads expand faster than anticipated. The Rhine, long considered a natural fortress, has been breached decisively. At 1,300 hours, reconnaissance confirms that the inflatable concentration opposite Wesel has largely disappeared. Fields once crowded with phantom armor now reveal only shell-torn earth. The deception is undeniable. Within headquarters, officers grapple with the implications. Intelligence failures are dissected in terse exchanges. How did aerial reconnaissance miss the seams? How did acoustic analysts fail to question uniform sound patterns? Why did radio intercepts match so flawlessly? The answer is uncomfortable. Because the deception was comprehensive. Visual cues aligned with doctrinal spacing. Sound signatures mimicked authentic operational tempo. Radio procedures mirrored established core networks. Each element reinforced the others, creating a feedback loop of confirmation bias. German command believed what it expected to see. Meanwhile, American forces exploit widening gaps along the eastern bank. Armored divisions push toward the Ruhr industrial heartland. Infantry advances through towns whose defenders are still repositioning from the phantom threat. Momentum compounds. By late afternoon, the Rhine crossing is no longer a fragile operation, but a sustained offensive. Supply columns stream across completed bridges. Artillery batteries establish firing positions on eastern soil. Air support intensifies over retreating German formations attempting to regroup. The deception at Wesel becomes a footnote in operational reports, overshadowed by the larger breakthrough. But in private assessments, senior Allied planners acknowledge its impact. Hours gained at the river translated into miles gained inland. Reduced resistance at critical crossing points lowered casualty projections. Strategic tempo accelerated. As dusk approaches, the Ghost Army convoy pulls away from the cratered fields north of Wesel. No banners fly. No speeches mark their departure. They move quietly toward their next assignment, another sector where shadows may once again be required. Behind them, the river flows unchanged, yet the defensive line it once symbolized has collapsed. German generals had prepared for brute force. They were undone by imagination. March 24th, 1945, 0600 hours. Eastern bank of the Rhine, outskirts of the Ruhr. Morning breaks over a landscape already in motion. Columns of American armor push eastward, engines growling across frost-hardened roads. Sherman tanks fan out in staggered formations, infantry riding the rear decks, scanning tree leans for signs of ambush. The crossing of the Rhine is no longer a gamble. It is a fact. Behind them, pontoon bridges stretch across the water like steel arteries, pulsing with supply convoys and artillery batteries. Engineers tighten anchor lines as trucks rumble past. The foothold secured in darkness now feeds an expanding offensive aimed directly at Germany's industrial heart. German command struggles to stabilize a defensive line. Units once anchored north of Wesel arrive piecemeal, exhausted from rushed redeployment. Fuel shortages delay armored coordination. Roadways remain under intermittent Allied air attack. The cohesion required for a decisive counterstroke never fully materializes. Instead, resistance fractures. In villages east of the river, German infantry form hasty defensive perimeters around crossroads and railway embankments. Machine gun nests chatter from second-story windows. Panzerfaust teams wait behind stone walls, hope and catch advancing armor in narrow streets. American tactics adapt quickly. Infantry dismount before entering built-up areas. Artillery softens suspected strong points. Engineers clear mines from approaches. The tempo remains relentless. By midday, the operational picture becomes clear. The Rhine has not merely been crossed. It has been exploited. Multiple bridgeheads linked together, forming a continuous front that pushes toward the Ruhr Basin. Within German headquarters, maps once marked with defensive arcs are now overlaid with retreat routes. Communications traffic grows frantic. Requests for reinforcements go unanswered or are met with grim reality. There are few reserves left capable of organized maneuver. The deception at Wesel lingers like a bruise in after-action discussions. Senior officers acknowledge privately that critical hours were lost responding to a threat that never existed. Artillery ammunition expended. Infantry pinned in positions guarding empty fields. Armor battalions delayed when speed was essential. Those hours now translate into miles. American armored spearheads begin encircling key industrial nodes. Rail lines are severed. Bridges over tributaries fall under Allied control before demolition charges can be placed. The industrial output sustaining Germany's war machine starts to falter under physical and psychological pressure. Soldiers advancing through captured positions discover shell craters gouged deep into empty farmland north of Wesel. The ground testifies to the night's fury against inflatable armor. Men pause briefly, recognizing how many shells fell where no steel stood. They move on. At Corps headquarters, operational planners review reconnaissance photographs. The southern crossings have exceeded projected timelines. Casualty figures, while still sobering, are lower than initial estimates for a forced river assault against prepared defenses. The margin was created by confusion, and confusion was engineered. As dusk falls on March 24th, American armored units press deeper into the German interior. Resistance stiffens in isolated pockets, but lacks strategic coordination. Without a unified counterattack at the river line, German forces fight fragmented engagements that bleed manpower without reversing momentum. Air superiority compounds the pressure. Fighter bombers sweep road networks, targeting retreating convoys and disrupting attempts to consolidate. Smoke rises from fuel depots hastily abandoned. Within 48 hours of the initial crossing, the operational initiative has shifted decisively. The Rhine, once considered the final natural barrier to Allied advance, has become a logistical conduit for invasion. The Ghost Army, meanwhile, prepares for another assignment. Their convoy halts miles from the river in a wooded assembly area. Inflatable equipment is inspected, repaired, repacked. Sound recordings are cataloged for future use. Radio operators review call sign matrices for upcoming operations. Their work remains classified, their contributions unpublicized. Yet the ripple effect of their performance continues to expand across the map. German generals had sought to anticipate brute force and mass divisions. They had fortified riverbanks and calibrated artillery for frontal assault. They had not fully accounted for deception layered with precision. In the days that follow, Allied forces will drive toward the Ruhr encirclement, tightening a noose around the industrial core of the Reich. The crossing of the Rhine will be cited as a turning point in the final campaign in Western Europe. Few will mention the rubber tanks that drew fire into empty fields. Fewer still will understand how close the defense came to concentrating where the real blow would fall. War often hinges on strength. Sometimes it hinges on belief. And once belief collapses, so too does the line it was meant to defend. March 26, 1945, 0430 hours. Forward command post, Allied 9th Army, Western Germany. Fog hangs low over the pocked farmland, rolling like smoke from distant artillery. Soldiers move silently along dirt tracks, rifles slung, eyes scanning mist-shrouded hedgerows. A faint clatter of canvas echoes through the pre-dawn gloom. The Ghost Army has deployed again, this time further east. Inflatable tanks, half-buried decoys, and colossal sound projectors are positioned along abandoned roads and railway embankments. Engines rumble from hidden loudspeakers, mimicking the roar of a mechanized division moving toward the front. The Germans, still scarred by previous nights, respond instinctively. Observers in makeshift forward positions report armor concentrations that do not exist. Commanders call for artillery barges on empty fields. Panzer units are rerouted, sometimes miles away from their actual intended positions. Every misdirected shell, every delayed troop movement, chips away at the coherence of the German defensive network. Inside a commandeered farmhouse, Colonel Harry L. T. Williams of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops reviews the night's deployments on a hand-drawn map. Lines trace the movement of phantom columns, while annotations mark the timing of sound and light cues. The deception must hold until the real crossing points are secured, or Allied units risk encountering concentrated enemy fire before the bridgeheads solidify. Williams steps outside. The mist clings to his boots as he surveys the terrain. Somewhere beyond the fog, real armored units advance, crossing canals and streams toward the Rhine. Infantry scouts report small engagements, German infantry in hastily dug positions exchanging sporadic fire. But the main armored thrust encounters no coordinated opposition. Tanks that should have formed a cohesive defense are scattered, some diverted entirely by decoy movements. From the German perspective, the battlefield is chaotic. General Alfred Schlemm, commanding the LXXVI Army Corps, paces within his headquarters, surrounded by maps and teleprinters. Messages arrive reporting tank sightings where none exist. Reconnaissance reports suggest Allied armored concentrations along roads that, in reality, are empty fields. Ammunition is expended, reserves deployed, and defensive lines stretched thin in anticipation of an attack that never comes. By dawn, the deception reaches full effect. Phantom units appear along multiple axes, supported by sound trucks projecting engine roars, artillery creaks, and troop movements. The visual illusion is reinforced by painted canvas, inflated tank bodies, and smoke generators simulating the exhaust of armored columns. German spotters, already fatigued from previous nights, interpret these signals as genuine threats. Orders cascade down the chain of command, often conflicting and late, producing hesitation and misalignment on the front. Meanwhile, real Allied units cross the Rhine at points deliberately chosen to exploit these diversions. Engineers have assembled pontoon bridges and ferries under the cover of darkness, allowing infantry, artillery, and light armor to gain footholds on the far bank. The momentum builds incrementally, quietly, while German commanders chase shadows. In the villages near Wesel, American riflemen advance cautiously. Houses are cleared room by room, while scouts verify that German positions are abandoned or minimally manned. Artillery observers, equipped with portable radios, report occasional return fire, but nothing capable of halting the advance. Mines and booby traps are cleared by sappers with steady hands and nerves of steel. By mid-morning, the Rhine's eastern bank is under firm Allied control. Sherman tanks roll through fog-drenched fields, joined by infantry consolidating captured terrain. Engineers begin repairing roads and clearing obstacles to allow for the passage of heavier artillery and supplies. The operation, seemingly conventional in appearance, owes much of its success to the invisible hand of the Ghost Army. German officers continue to misinterpret the battlefield. They report sightings of tanks and divisions that, in reality, are inflated rubber decoys. Communications channels buzz with alarm as units are redeployed to confront phantom threats. The actual Allied thrust faces fragmented opposition, where concentrated resistance might have inflicted severe casualties. Instead, forces encounter scattered pockets of soldiers, isolated machine gun nests, and abandoned equipment. Back at the Allied Forward Command Post, intelligence officers compile aerial reconnaissance images. Shadowy outlines of decoy columns are visible in the fog and early sunlight. Analysts note discrepancies between observed positions and actual engagement zones. Yet the immediate effect is clear. German forces have committed resources to false threats, allowing the main crossings to progress unimpeded. Colonel Williams reviews the map again. The timing of inflatable armor deployment, the sequencing of sound trucks, and the coordination with real unit movements are critical. He calculates when each phantom element will retreat, creating the illusion of withdrawal to mask the real advance. It is a game of perception, a battle fought with minds and imagination rather than steel alone. By evening, Allied units push beyond initial footholds. Bridges and roads over the Rhine are secure, supply lines operational, and armored columns poised for exploitation of the fractured German defenses. Commanders recognize the psychological advantage has been decisive. German forces remain hesitant, dispersed, and uncertain of where to concentrate firepower. Across the front, the human element underscores the campaign's complexity. Soldiers advancing along the Rhine encounter civilians emerging from basements and cellars, faces pale with fear or relief. Some offer guidance, others remain wary. Each interaction is fleeting but shapes the perception of security, informing small tactical choices. In the weeks that follow, the Ghost Army continues to support Allied maneuvers, simulating the presence of entire divisions where none exist. Inflatable tanks, dummy artillery, and recorded sounds reinforce the illusion, keeping German commanders guessing. This psychological manipulation magnifies operational advantage. turning uncertainty into strategic space. The Rhine crossing becomes a textbook example of how deception can amplify conventional strength. Strategic outcomes: territory secured, supply lines maintained, industrial regions threatened, are achieved with minimal casualties relative to the scale of operations. Few understand the invisible work behind the lines. Soldiers on front credit preparation, timing, and audacity, while planners recognize the subtler contributions of the men who orchestrated illusions from wooded clearings and barns. Inflatable armor sound trucks, and misdirection when battles without firing a shot. By the end of March, the Allied push into the Ruhr Basin is unstoppable. German forces, demoralized and fragmented, can no longer mount cohesive counterattacks. Strategic calculations that once relied on river barriers and defensive concentrations must be abandoned. The Rhine, crossed not by overwhelming force but by deception and ingenuity, has opened the door to the heart of the Reich. And somewhere in the shadowed forest behind the front lines, the men of the Ghost Army pack away their canvas tanks and silent speakers. Their work is done for now, but its echoes ripple across the map. The Rhine stands crossed, German defense is fractured, and the war inches closer to its decisive conclusion. The deception has succeeded. Lives have been spared. Strategy has prevailed. Yet the true power of this operation lies not in territory gained or rivers crossed, but in the fragile, imperceptible margin between belief and reality, a margin that can shift the fate of nations.